Hello and welcome back to Death is for the Dying, a special season of the Life is for the Living podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca Richmond. In our last episode, we dove into the experience of getting a terminal diagnosis, but that is just the beginning of the process. Once you can wrap your head around the fact that you or your loved one is facing death in the next few months, the next few years, there's a whole slew of questions that you have to face. What treatments should you take? Should you do everything possible to extend your life as long as possible? Or do you focus on being comfortable? What do you need to make life worth living? What level of pain is too much? And if it's available to you, do you apply for medical aid in dying? Here we continue our conversations with Mara and also bring in end-of-life doula Kathy to talk about that decision overload that comes with a terminal diagnosis. As the ALS slowly paralyzed Pat, one question came to the forefront for Mara and him. To trach or not to trach? A tracheostomy would make sure that Pat could continue to breathe, but it also meant that he would be utterly dependent on others and unable to speak. For Mara, there was only fighting with everything she had. But for Pat, it was a more complicated question.
It's a big decision, do I want to be locked in and not be able to move and have everybody taking care of me, or just die? I mean, what a decision to make, right? I know a couple times when he was like, I think this is too much. I think I just need to call it a day. I was like, you have to call your brother. I don't know how to do that with you. I'm so sorry. I will do anything you ask me to do. I don't know how to just stop fighting. Once I want your wishes to be carried out, I just don't know how to do that. Like, I don't know how to process, like, okay, we're going to switch directions and go. We're just going to give up. Or just, it's not give up. It's courageous in many ways. I shouldn't call it giving up. It's many of our friends have done it. It's so hard to make that decision. Yeah, I can't process it. Like, my brain just doesn't work that way. I think some of those times he said it, he was just at the lowest point because he's always been a fighter and had amazing stamina. And so I think back to those times, like, I don't know if he was super serious all those times, but I should have taken him more seriously. But yeah, I don't have a good coping mechanism. I just have always thought from the beginning, like, we're going to figure this freaking thing out. Like, if other people can figure it out, we can do it. But the truth is, like, once you're fully paralyzed, one person has come back from that, but it was early. He was only paralyzed for 2 years. So it's looking more and more unlikely. So I'm going to have to start to face that, I suppose. But I haven't done any wide scientific study, but I don't know of anybody else. I know a lot of folks with this disease, and 16 is it. And that's what the doctors told us too. Like, 15 is what you're looking at. So it's hard for me to imagine what would go wrong, though. Like, we've been in this holding pattern for 2 years, essentially, since he got his gallbladder out.
I asked Mara a question from Atul Gawandé's book, Being Mortal. One question to have with your loved ones is, what is sufficient for you to want to live? What's enough? Is it being able to eat ice cream and watch football? I asked my dad this, and he's like, I need to be able to actively be contributing to the scientific community. And I'm like, okay, Dad. You're going to be dying quickly.
That's hilarious.
That's some high expectations you got of yourself. Clearly for my mom, it's having Coke and pretzels. Yeah. That is sufficient. But like, have you thought about that or had that conversation with Pat, or even just thought about it for yourself? Because you've been faced with this. Like, what is enough to make life worth living?
That's oh my gosh, you guys have such good questions. We have talked about that, like, how many days, because I bring it up, like, when he says, I'm done, because he'll have like 3 great days a bad day, 5 great days, a bad day. And those bad days, he's like, I'm done. But I'll say, well, remember, like you had a great day yesterday and you were so glad to be living. You know, I've never talked about it with him per se, but we've talked about it with other people who are dying. And when do you do it? He's never really answered me. He's just like, that's a dumb question, I guess. But he can do a lot with his eyes. I have to believe Pat, even if he loses, even if he only has a little cheek, he's been through all of it. I mean, eye gaze is already like takes forever to communicate through eye gaze. Like, I just can't imagine there's anything else that can be thrown at this man who would say, that's too much. But maybe, I guess there's always another limit. But yeah, we should all have that conversation with our loved ones. I mean, it's so important to know what is your level of happy or sad that is just too much, not worth continuing. Pain's a big one. Like ALS is painful. They say it's not. You'll hear that it's not. That is not true. There is a lot of pain. Everybody we know has pain. Or they take pain meds. They get out of it through pain meds. But so the question is, how much pain is too much? I think we feel like we've figured out a good cadence here with pain meds, and ALS is notorious for just when you think you've gotten into a stride, you're going to lose something else. But we've had, like I said, since mid-December, no function loss that I can see or that he's reported.
Why do you think he continues to fight? Why do you continue?
Well, mine's easy. I'll answer that first. It's just, if you love someone, you're just going to fight for them. Like, I don't see any other way, really. But for him, I think it's, he's just always had such purpose in life. He's always been one who helps people. So he's kind of flipped around the way he helps people to do it through maps. He's always loved maps too, since I met him. So he's been doing these really cool projects through maps. And he says, I am excited to get up in the morning and get working on my maps. He looks forward to getting on his computer. I mean, we all kind of do, but you think, like, if you're fighting this thing, why would you? Why would you? But he does, and I get it. I see how it motivates him, and he is one of the reasons the Act for ALS passed. I always tell people that because it's absolutely true. His maps really motivated people and made it easy to pinpoint who we need to target, and his maps made a huge difference, and they still are. He's doing incredible things with his maps today. So I think that's why he continues to fight.
One thing that people tend to put off, but really should consider even in the early days, is to whether or not to apply to palliative care or hospice care. Kathy explains the difference.
So palliative care is that you have a life-threatening illness, but it doesn't mean that you're going to die anytime soon. Sometimes, say for instance, ALS journey can be 3 or 4 years, or it could be 16 years. And same kind of thing with dementia, certain types of dementia. So when we're on palliative care, it is comfort, quality of life support. And it could be that it is finding out what's meaningful to the individual. My daughter was on palliative care for 9 months. What was meaningful to her was the medical. She loved medical. They made her an honorary doctor. They did life review and reflection, and they even interviewed her and asked her what she'd like the medical community to know about living with a life-threatening illness. So it's comfort focused. It's about finding out what provides support. Palliative care is not as, usually if it's in the home environment, it may be once a month kind of visits, but it is also a precursor because it is comfort focused. But when things begin to change and the person is within 6 months or less, then there's an easy transition to hospice care. So palliative care, you can also receive blood transfusions. You can also receive chemo or radiation, knowing that it is to provide comfort. It's not about curing. It is about comfort, say shrinking a tumor that can make life easier for the individual. So that's the palliative. And hospice is the journey that supports a person as they're moving towards the end of life. You have to have a referral by a physician, although people can seek a consultation without a referral, but most people don't know that. It's just like Kaiser Hospice. People think, oh, you have to just use Kaiser, but you can actually pick any hospice that is a fit for you. So hospice is federally regulated. Neither plan actually costs the individual any money whatsoever. And you have to have a diagnosis in which they meet criteria of life is going to be less than 6 months or so. What was always so hard for me is that people didn't understand about hospice and often would get on hospice so late. Hospice is also, whereas palliative care doesn't provide any kind of durable medical equipment, they do provide a doctor who might see a person once a month, a social worker and a nurse, whereas in hospice, they will gauge how often they're visited by what the needs of the person is. Hospice then is providing the hospital bed, the oxygen, any kind of durable medical equipment that a person needs. The doctor usually is overseeing the case and the medications, but they are not coming into the home setting, whereas the nurse and the social worker and the nursing assistant, rather. And also another piece of both palliative and hospice is also music. Oftentimes a harp, guitarists, threshold singers is a small group of women and men all around our area that will sing at the bedside in skill-assisted living in home environments. Hearing is the last to go. Music has a way of connecting us spiritually with much of our lives.
Mara was aware of the benefits that hospice could provide, but she was also aware of the limitations for those with ALS.
Like when you go on hospice, you get basically a little packet of drugs so that the person doesn't suffer. So you call the nurse right away and they come in. I guess it depends what state you're into, what like United States state you're in, if you can do that or whatever. I don't know all the ins and outs of that, but I know like there's a way to make sure your loved one does not suffer. And now that we're talking about it, I'm not prepared. I don't know how to, we have pain meds, like, his daily pain meds, but I don't know. I should have who would I call? We have a nurse that we can call. So maybe I would call her and say like, okay, he's decided he's in too much pain or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a plan for that. It would be smart to have one. It's a good question. It's making me think like I should at least have a plan, like who would we call? What would, I guess, I don't know how that even works.
You said he's in hospice?
No, he's not on hospice, but a lot of our friends do that not simply, but so that they have that figured out and a way to transition, as they call it. Or you get certain benefits if you're on hospice, but you don't get treatments that are coming in the pipeline that, if there's something that just pops into the pipeline, you can't get it. But there's nothing really fabulous in the pipeline right now anyway. Yeah, it's amazing what you don't get PT.
Physical therapy.
Like for an ALS patient, I don't know about other patients, but you need PT. You need to keep your joints moving or else it's very, very, very painful. Even if you don't plan to keep living, you need PT. And it's actually more than PT because you got to stretch. Like PT folks don't quite understand how to really work with ALS. So we had to make up our own way and we help others do it, which is something Pat has done. That is great, a great legacy because it's helped so many people. But anyway, like it's crazy that once you sign up for hospice, you don't get any professional PT person or OT person.
Occupational therapy.
Or anything that's going to prolong your life, basically. Or make you comfortable other than pain-free while you transition. I know hospice, everybody loves hospice. We have a lot of ALS folks that just get on hospice. It makes your life so much easier. But I disagree with that. I mean, if that's your decision and you're like, I'm done. This fight is too much. I totally get it. This disease is insane. But if you want to be around for a little bit, hospice is not the way to go.
Another question to be grappled with is, if you're eligible, do you pursue medical aid in dying, or MAID? MAID is legal in California, Colorado, Hawaii, Maine, Montana, New Jersey, New Mexico, Oregon, Vermont, and Washington. And while requirements vary from state to state, in general, you would need to have a terminal diagnosis with a short life expectancy, be able to make your own medical decisions, get 2 doctors to refer you for it, and be able to take the medication unaided. If you are successful in being granted MAID, you will get a combination of medications that will act as sedatives while stopping your breathing. I talked to Kathy about MAID, and she brought an alternative, which was VSED, voluntary stopping eating and drinking.
I certainly cannot administer that medication, and I don't actually want to. That would probably be the biggest one. However, as an end-of-life doula, to be able to provide emotional support, spiritual support for that person, to know that they're not alone, I can do that. In fact, I actually had a client in the middle of COVID that had moved from Georgia to West Seattle, initially to Cancer Care Alliance, but she also had moved to this state so that it would be available to her if she wanted to use it. She had the medication and she chose not to use it. First, she wanted to give it away, then she took it back. I locked it in my glove compartment because it felt uncomfortable. It was a difficult death. It was a 55-year-old woman, and it was hard in many different ways for her and her family. As far as personally, I probably would not utilize it. I think that if I had a terminal diagnosis, I did have a client that she was actually an oncology hospice nurse. She also had Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, and she was about mid-stage, and she made a very conscious decision to use VSED. So VSED is voluntary stop eating and drinking. In fact, that's what a lot of folks do at end-stage dementia. Their body is shutting down. More and more folks, and what she had was she knew more than anybody what the neurological effects and what end of life would be for her. And I actually met her in her adult family home. And then we really did a lot of life review and reflection. And she had a lot of unfinished business. So we had that opportunity to spend time talking and for her to actually have some resolution with her siblings in which there was discord. Her mom was still alive. And then her children, while they didn't completely agree, supported her. And they actually moved their mom from the adult family home to the daughter's home. And they had rented an RV of which they took out all the beds and big chairs and everything. So they were able to put the hospital bed in there. And therefore, it wasn't in the house, but it was their private space. And a few of our hospice entities fully support someone who chooses VSED. And she actually chose a specific date, August 18th, to stop eating and drinking. She chose that date because she didn't want to be a burden to her daughter who would be returning to school to teach in September.
Well, Pat would not necessarily need medical aid in dying, as it's inaction rather than action that will take his life. He would still need help to die. I asked Mara what would happen if Pat got to that point.
I think it would be very hard for me to help him die. I do think I tell him all the time, like, if we're going that way, we got to call your brother. We got to call somebody else. I am not the person. I'll be a freak show. I'll be crazy. I just know it. I can't. You will need some help with that. And his brother's all about it. I mean, he's happy to help wherever he can. If this is the thing he needs to help with, I'm sure he won't love it. He's attached as I am to his brother, but I would do it if he really wanted me to. Of course, I don't want him to be in pain, but it would be really, really, really hard. And I don't trust myself to use good judgment at that moment. Like I feel like I would be wanting to keep him here for me. So another reason I would want his brother here, just to make sure I'm doing the right thing. And I just want him here as long as he possibly can be here. And even if he's doing it a little bit for me and not so much for him, it should be 100% him, but I'm okay with that.
Other decisions that have to be made do not necessarily have to do with the dying themselves, but the soon-to-be grieving. Setting up wills, living trusts, making funeral plans. For Mara, with her laser focus on keeping Pat alive, this was beyond what she could handle or even think about.
My brain hasn't really gone there, but you're right. Nobody escapes this thing. So I need to get serious and try to process it a little better than I have.
Yeah, I would say having plans in place.
Oh, he did all that. I would not have done any of that, but I did it for me. I did it in case I go, and he has stuff. But yeah, he had to do that all on his own, and he did that right away. As soon as he got the diagnosis, he's like, "We're setting up a trust. We're doing this," or
That was the other lesson I learned from my advisor dying. He did not have a will set up. And so his widow just went through hell because someone challenged the probate. She was house rich and cash poor. But the house was in near the sea in Santa Barbara.
Oh yeah.
But you have to pay probate's like a percentage of your wealth.
Yeah.
And since house counts as wealth, it was a pretty hefty bill for her. So that's why I'm like, just make sure everything is straightened out. It's a hard thing to say, but it's really the best gift because you don't want to have somebody who's already grieving to also have all these bills and may have to make all these decisions and all of that.
Yeah, especially the end of life decisions. Yes. That's so hard. I always find it funny. They ask us, does he have a DNR? Yeah, but we do once a week heart pounding lung clearings to keep him going. So I don't know what the DNR, I guess the DNR is about restarting your heart or something. There is a subtlety there that I probably don't understand, but it always strikes me as funny. It's like every nurse who comes in here, every RT, okay, where's his DNR? Well, it's here, but you do understand. We do heroic measures a lot here, and we're going to continue to do that. He wants that. So here's your DNR, though, that says don't do heroic measures, but whatever. Yeah, it's kind of funny. But yeah, he set all that stuff up, and we're okay if it happens on that front. Yeah, it's so sad to think about. I can't even get my head around it. I can't imagine that day, but it's inevitable.
In our next episode, we explore the stage that Mara and I are both currently in. The waiting period when you know your loved one is dying, but you don't know when. As always, thank you for joining us. And if you want to join in this conversation about death, you can reach us at lifeisfortheL on Twitter and Instagram, or email us at lifeisforthelivingpodcast@gmail.com. You can also now watch us on the Life is for the Living YouTube channel. Take care and see you next time.